this is Chris with Hefty Fabworks. We're going to be doing a install video today on this Nissan Frontier. We'll be doing a skid plate install. This is going to be for all of the 2005 through 2019 Nissan Frontiers, as well as the 2005 through 2015 Nissan Xterras. The installation is pretty much identical. We just have a couple minor things. The skids are slightly different. There's actually only one bracket that's different on the gas tank skids. Otherwise, the installation is the same. We will start from the back, work our way forward, which is the way you should do the full skid install. If you're just doing individual skids, we will do these in individual videos, but each skid will have its own video. And we just wanted to make sure that we can get you guys the best information possible on how to install these. We're gonna go ahead and start with the gas tank installation on this Nissan Frontier. It's a second generation Nissan Frontier. We have removed the factory gas tank skid. We do have the vehicle up on a lift. Obviously, most people will be doing this on the ground, but the installation is the same. We're gonna start by going through our package, and here's our skid plate here. And in your package, you will have these three brackets. This is for a Frontier. For the Xterra, this bracket is going to be slightly different. But the installation is pretty much the same. That bracket just fits in a different location on the frame. Just back a little bit further. In that package, you will have the three brackets. You're going to have 5 3/8 inch by 1 inch bolts with flat washers. This is a 10 millimeter by 125 thread bolt for the side of the frame on the Frontier. The Xterra is going to give you a little bit different bolt that will be in the instructions. And then you got 4 8 millimeter bolts here. Those are going to go into the frame. Those are factory threaded holes in the frame. There will also be a 1 inch bolt or a 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch bolt and nut that will go into this top bracket here. Will go up into the frame. We will not be installing that in this video, but just because we're going to be moving on to the transfer case skid plate. If you're running a transfer case skid plate, that bolt will come in your transfer case skid plate bolt package. So we're going to start with the gas tank skid. All right, we've gone ahead and hung the brackets now. These are threaded holes, so this is our 10 millimeter bolt up here and one of our 8 millimeter bolts here. The bracket is going to stay loose. That's going to be the case with all of the brackets. Our L bracket is back in here. It goes up into the side up here into a threaded hole next to the rear of the gas tank, up around the side of the gas tank strap. Again, hanging nice and loose. And then our third bracket is up at the front cross member. Again, 8 millimeter bolt here. It's just going to sit here and hang loose. If you're just getting the gas tank skid, there will be a 1/2 inch bolt that goes through this opening here, and the nut and bolt goes up on the top of that cross member. We will be installing that with the transfer case skid when we do that next. But again, all brackets have to be hung and extremely loose. Just get them up there, and we'll go ahead and we're going to install that skid plate. All right, now we've got all of the bolts started. Everything is still just kind of nice and loose. You see them all sitting in here. And what we'll do now is we'll just go ahead and start tightening them down. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna tighten them down from the frame side first. We wanna pull the skid as far towards the frame as possible. That way we maximize our clearance on the drive shaft. This is especially important on the Xterras, as the drive shaft flange here actually sits right about here, right next to the bracket. So we want to make sure that that skid is as far over to the driver's side towards the frame rail as possible. All right, so we've got all the bolts now tightened up and everything. Again, don't use an impact gun on the Nissans. The threaded bolts in the frame have a tendency to break loose. And other than that, everything's nice and tight. We did leave out this one because we're going to be using that on the next install with the transfer case skid. Again, it is best to work from the back of the vehicle towards the front, and then everything, again, tighten it by hand. Just snug everything up. It doesn't have to be overly tightened. The biggest importance on this skid plate when you're doing the install is to make sure that you do leave all those brackets really loose when you're doing your initial mock-up and putting the skid on there. Most of our customers that have issues with these, they've tightened down a bolt too much, which causes everything to just be really difficult to get into place. So if you leave everything loose while you're doing the install, get all the bolts started, everything in, then tighten it all down again from the frame side over towards the center of the vehicle. That will make your install go a whole lot smoother. All right, now we're on to the transfer case skid plate. So again, we've just finished up our gas tank skid here. At the back of the vehicle, we're gonna now work into our transfer case skid. We're gonna install this. We're gonna leave it a little bit loose because we're gonna be doing the transmission skid next. But we are going to work off of these bolts, the threaded holes in the cross member here. If they are excessively rusty or dirty, we do recommend that you run a tap through the threads. It should be an 8mm by 125 thread. If you run that tap, it'll make your life a lot easier. You won't break nuts and bolts loose. So we always recommend chasing the threads on these and getting that to the point where you can thread them in nice and easy. And we're gonna go ahead and start the install. So right now what we're doing is we're pre-installing the bolts into the cross member here. The skid is slotted, so you can actually pre-install them. It makes installation a lot easier. This is where we're going to use the 1/2-inch supplied bolt with the washer underneath, and it's going to go through the gas tank bracket in the cross member right up into the frame, and then drop in a flat washer, a lock washer, and then the nut. All right, so we got that started there. Now everything should sit right up into place here. We're gonna leave the front edge just a little bit loose. We're gonna kind of drive it up into close to in position, but the front skid or the transmission skid's gonna fit kind of in between it. It kind of wraps around it. So we're gonna do that, and then we'll come back and we'll tighten all these down. Hardware for the transfer case skid is this 1/2-inch bolt with the flat washers and lock washers, as well as the 3 8mm bolts and flat washers. All right, now we have our transmission skid here, as well as the hardware. So we're gonna have some longer 1/2-inch bolts, and then some 1.5-inch long. So these are, I think, 2.5 if I remember right. As well as flat washers, lock washers, and nuts. And in the individual skid, if you order just the individual, there will be 2 additional 8mm bolts. Those right now in this kit, because we're doing the engine skid, are in the engine skid package. Transmission skid is on. We've got the shorter 1/2-inch bolts up in the center. We started with those because they'll support the skid. And then the longer 1/2-inch bolts go all the way through the cross member. Now that we're done with that, we can go ahead and we can tighten down this skid. You can see it fits up in between. So we'll tighten both the transfer case and the transmission skid down. And then when we move to the front up here with the engine skid, it will overlap our transmission skid. So I did leave these bolts out for now. All right, now we're on to our engine skid. This would be the front side of the vehicle with the lip on it. And then right here is our hardware. So we're gonna have the 4 8mm bolts. Those are gonna go into the threaded holes. They're gonna be 2 different lengths. There's gonna be longer ones and shorter ones. And then we have 4 3/8-inch bolts with flat washers. and nuts. So we're gonna get started on the install here. All right, so we've got the 4 8mm bolts in place. We're gonna go ahead and tighten these down. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in on these 4 outer corners. Through the control arm, there's this little tab underneath here. And we're gonna go ahead and drill through there, and we're gonna put 4 3/8" bolts on each corner, or 1 on each corner, so there'll be 4 total. So we're gonna go ahead and get these tight and go from there. All right, now we're on to our radiator skid. This one has already been installed. The customer had the bumper before, so he had a radiator skid with it. But what we're gonna do is, now that the engine skid is installed, we're gonna go ahead and loosen these 2 bolts up, and the radiator skid will slide into those. And then we'll be bolting up to the bottom side of the frame. There's our bumper brackets there, but we'll be going right up into the threaded holes in the frame. If need be, on those holes, if you need to tap those are a 12mm 125 thread. Just be careful not to cross thread or put too much torque. Again, do not use a impact gun on these. All right, so we've now done the radiator skid, the engine skid, the transmission skid, the transfer case skid, and the gas tank skid. Again, full coverage on the underside of this truck. All the vital components are covered. Hope this helps.